Go get my car. Be careful. That paint job is worth more than you make in an entire year. In the middle of the engagement party, Victor Bennett dropped the key to his Bentley into Noah's palm without even giving him a second glance. Beneath the crystal chandeliers of the Bennett mansion, Noah's old charcoal suit looked completely out of place among the designer evening gowns and luxury watches. Several guests covered their mouths as they laughed. Grace stepped forward, gently took the key from Noah's hand, and gave it back to her brother. "You have made a mistake, Victor. This is Noah Reed, my future husband." The music seemed to grow quieter. People looked from Grace's silk dress down to Noah's worn shoes. One woman let out a soft laugh. Victor stared at his sister as though she had just told a terrible joke. "You are seriously going to marry the maintenance worker from the rehabilitation center?" "He is more than a maintenance worker." "That is true," Victor smirked. "He also knows how to work his way into a wealthy family." Noah did not respond. He simply moved closer to Grace, resting one hand against her back as a quiet reminder that she did not have to face the room alone. At that moment, the sound of a collision cut through the party. A young server had tripped over the leg of a chair, splashing red wine onto Victor's sleeve. "Are you blind?" Victor shouted. "Where is the manager? Fire her immediately." The young woman turned pale. Noah stepped forward and took the towel from her trembling hand. "It was my fault. I stepped backward without looking behind me." Victor stared at the wine stain, then threw the rest of his drink directly onto Noah's chest. "Then you should get used to serving wealthy people." Grace clenched her fists so tightly that her fingernails dug into her palms. Noah still did not lose his temper. He bent down and picked up a small object that had fallen from his jacket pocket. It was a brass key with the symbol H17 engraved into the top. He used the towel to wipe away every drop of wine, moving so slowly and deliberately that Victor's smile gradually became strained. "There are some doors," Noah said, "that should only be opened after everyone has chosen the right side." "Are you threatening me?" "Noah is only talking about a key." Grace looked directly at her brother. "If that frightens you, then perhaps he is not the problem." The balance of power in the room shifted in a matter of seconds. Victor was the first person to look away. An elderly guest pushed through the crowd to leave, unaware that his leather wallet had fallen onto the floor. Noah picked it up, hurried after him, and returned it. The man checked the money inside before pulling out a $100 bill. "Take it. Consider it payment for your trouble." Noah gently closed the man's hand around the bill. "You do not need to pay someone to return what already belongs to you." Richard Bennett had been watching everything from the top of the staircase. He walked down with a white envelope in his hand. "Grace, come into the study." "We can talk right here." Richard stopped in front of his daughter, pulled out a check, and placed it on the table. The amount, $100,000, immediately sparked a wave of whispers throughout the room. "Cancel the wedding. This money will help you pay off the medical debt from the time you spent caring for your mother, and it will give you a chance to start over." Grace stared at the check. She remembered the unpaid bills still hidden inside a drawer, the calls from debt collectors, and every night she had slept beside her mother's hospital bed while Richard stopped by for only a few minutes. $100,000 could erase every burden she carried. Noah spoke softly. "You do not have to prove anything to anyone." Grace picked up the check. Richard smiled, but the smile disappeared the moment she tore it in half. "I watched Mom wait for you through the final days of her life. I will not trade love for financial security the way she did. If you walk out of this house, Richard said coldly, you will never receive another dollar from the Bennett family. Grace placed the two torn pieces of paper on the table. Then at least, starting today, everything I have will truly belong to me. She took Noah's hand and walked out of the mansion. Behind them, the crystal chandeliers were still shining brightly, but the laughter was gone. The apartment Noah rented in Riverside had only one bedroom, an old wooden table, and a window overlooking a row of faded brick buildings. Grace sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the red wine stain on his shirt. I am afraid I drag you into a war with my family. Noah knelt in front of her. I am marrying you, not your money. What about your past? Noah's expression suddenly changed. There are things I cannot tell you yet. Or things you do not want to tell me? Before he could answer, angry voices erupted in the hallway. An eviction notice had just been posted near the entrance. Every resident had 30 days to leave, so the Riverside Crown development could move forward. Denise, their elderly neighbor, pointed at the fine print with a trembling hand. I do not understand any of this. Do they really have the right to throw us out like this? Grace took the notice and read each clause aloud for her. When she saw the name Bennett Urban Development, her voice caught in her throat. This is my family's company. Noah took the notice from her. His eyes stopped on the name of a shell company responsible for the loan. His expression changed immediately. Do you know this company? Grace asked. It appeared in several financial records. You are a maintenance worker. Why were you reading financial records? Noah pointed to the interest rate and the funding requirements. He explained exactly how the loan, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, had been secured. He also identified a clause allowing the lender to freeze the entire project if the forced evictions had not followed proper legal procedures. Grace stared at him without blinking. Where did you learn all of this? I studied some of it once. The next morning at the rehabilitation center, a young girl in a wheelchair nearly fell because part of the access ramp had sunk. Noah immediately blocked the wheels, helped her back into a safe position, and spent the rest of the morning repairing the ramp without charging anyone. Later, an engineer sent by the Bennett company misread the plans while inspecting the fire alarm system. Noah pointed out a concealed pipe and an emergency exit that did not meet safety standards. You understand these plans better than the person who designed them, Grace said. Noah folded the blueprints. I simply pay closer attention. A man in a gray suit approached them with a respectful expression. Mr. H. Noah, he interrupted. Here, you can call me Noah. The man immediately fell silent and walked away. Grace mentioned the Heart Community Trust, the organization that controlled the approval of funding for the Riverside Crown project. For a brief moment, Noah's hand tightened around the H17 key. After he left, Grace noticed a handwritten note beside the blueprints. In the corner of the page was a stylized crown symbol, identical to the official seal of the Heart Community Trust. On the night before their simple wedding ceremony, Grace woke up after hearing Noah speaking behind a partially closed door. Do not approve the loan. I need more evidence before I reveal myself as Elias Hart. Grace stood frozen outside the door. Noah had never mentioned the name Elias Hart, but she had seen it earlier that afternoon, printed directly beneath the words Final Approval Authority on every document connected to the Riverside Crown project. The chapel bells rang as Grace stepped through the wooden doors, but only one name echoed through her mind: Elias Hart. Noah stood at the altar in the same old suit, now cleaned of the wine stains. His expression softened when he saw her, but Grace could not forget the phone call she had overheard the night before. She continued walking toward him, not because her doubts had disappeared, but because she wanted to discover for herself who the man waiting for her truly was. The small rows of seats were filled with Riverside residents, employees from the rehabilitation center, and a few close friends. Denise sat in the front row, wiping away tears. The Bennett family was nowhere to be seen. The seats reserved for Richard, Margaret, and Victor remained empty beneath the sunlight shining through the stained glass windows. When Noah placed the ring on Grace's finger, her hand trembled slightly. "I promise that you will never have to face anything alone." Grace looked deeply into his eyes. "I hope you understand what that promise truly means." After the wedding, they returned to the Riverside apartment. Grace placed her bouquet on the table and closed the door. "Who is Elias Hart?" Noah stood completely still. His silence was the first answer. "Did you hear me standing outside the door last night?" "No." Grace removed her wedding ring, but she did not put it down. "I heard you tell someone to stop the loan approval. Tell me the truth before I have to find it myself." Noah took the H-17 key from his pocket. "My full name is Elias Noah Hart. I control the Hart Community Trust." Grace took a step backward. The maintenance worker who had split dinners with her, counted every dollar for rent, and walked through the snow because his car was too old to repair, was actually the man who could decide the fate of a project worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Then who is Noah Reed? Noah is my middle name. Reed was my mother's last name. And the man I just married? He is still me. No. Grace tightened her hand around the ring. The man I married allowed me to believe that he had nothing, while he had enough power to bring my entire family to their knees. Elias explained that he had come to Riverside after receiving reports suggesting that safety records at several affordable housing properties had been altered. If he revealed his identity too soon, the people responsible would destroy the evidence. You thought hiding the truth was protecting me? I knew your family might be involved. Did you know that before you proposed to me? Elias did not answer immediately. That brief silence hurt Grace more than any confession could have. He opened his wallet and removed a photograph of a young woman. My sister, Lily, died in a fire at an affordable housing complex 12 years ago. The emergency exit was locked. The fire alarm system did not work, but the inspection report still said the building had passed. Since then, I have been investigating projects that show the same warning signs. Grace looked at the photograph and handed it back. My heart breaks for Lily. But your pain does not give you the right to decide what I am allowed to know about my husband. You are right. If this investigation involves my family, then I am going to be part of it. Do not protect me with another lie. Elias handed her the H-17 key. Then I will show you everything. In the basement maintenance room, the key opened an old metal cabinet marked H-17. Inside were copies of repair reports, complaints from residents, and lists of suspicious payments. Elias placed all of the files in Grace's hands. You have the right to decide whether you still want to stand beside me. Grace turned through the pages until she found the name of a shell company that had once received her shares in Bennett Urban Development. That same company had been purchasing Riverside apartments at low prices, then transferring the financial benefits to an account connected to Victor. I never signed my shares over to them. Then someone forged your signature. Elias's phone rang. A member of the board urged him to withdraw all funding from the project immediately. Elias looked at the attached list of employees and refused. If we withdraw the funding now, hundreds of innocent employees will lose their jobs. Freeze the Riverside loan, but keep the company's legitimate operations running until we have proof." Grace looked at him. For the first time since his confession, the anger inside her began to ease, even though the crack in their trust remained. That afternoon, the residents received a notice stating that electricity and water would be shut off in rotating sections for maintenance. Inside an apartment where 2 children lived, an electrical outlet suddenly began throwing sparks. Grace immediately shut off the circuit breaker, and she and Elias moved the entire family to a safe housing area at the rehabilitation center. Meanwhile, at the Bennett Urban Development Records Office, Victor discovered that someone had accessed the old files. He locked the door, ordered the digital records to be deleted, and demanded that every document carrying Grace's signature be destroyed. Late that evening, Grace went to Margaret's house. Her mother turned pale when she saw the transfer document. "I suspected that the signature was not real," Margaret admitted. "But your father said that if I spoke up, the family would lose everything. And you chose to stay silent while they took away what belonged to me?" Margaret lowered her head. Grace placed the file on the table in front of her. "I have not made your name public. I am giving you the chance to testify willingly, but I will not hide the truth to protect Victor and Dad." The preliminary forensic report arrived soon afterward. The signature used to surrender Grace's shares did not match any of her verified legal signatures. When Grace returned home, Elias handed her an envelope with yellowed edges. The letter inside had been written before their first date. In it, he instructed his staff to transfer the Bennett investigation to an independent team because he had developed feelings for Grace and did not want those feelings to influence the investigation. "I did not approach you because of the investigation," Elias said, "but I learned very early that your family was connected to Riverside." The letter proved that his love was real, but it also confirmed that he had been keeping secrets from the beginning. Before Grace could respond, her phone vibrated. An anonymous message from Claire appeared on the screen. "If you want to know what Victor did, check the payments made under my name." Grace opened the attached data file. Among countless invoices, she found an email Victor had sent to the project manager. "Do not repair the fire alarm system. We only need 3 more weeks. By then, most of the residents will leave on their own." At that exact moment, the alarm at Riverside began screaming. An entire floor had just lost power. Black smoke started pouring from the maintenance room where the remaining records were being stored. "Get the children down the stairs first. Nobody use the elevators." Grace's voice echoed through the dark hallways of Riverside. Smoke from the maintenance room rolled across the ceiling, while the fire alarm system remained completely silent. Elias used a flashlight to guide the elderly residents toward the emergency exit. Grace carried a young girl out of the apartment where an electrical outlet had started throwing sparks, then went back to help the rest of the family down the stairs. Suddenly, Denise ran back toward the upper floor. "Where are you going?" Grace shouted. "The complaint records. If they burn, Victor will claim that we never reported anything." Elias immediately disappeared into the smoke. Several minutes later, he brought Denise outside. She was holding a scorched bag of documents against her chest, while Elias carried the storage drive he had taken from cabinet H17. It was more than a symbol engraved on a key. H17 was the code Elias had created for his investigation in memory of Lily Hart, his younger sister, who had died in a fire after safety reports were falsified. The investigation at the scene confirmed that the fire had started in electrical wiring that had been reported as damaged several times, but had never been repaired. However, the following morning, Victor appeared in front of the press and blamed the residents for using their appliances carelessly. He still moved forward with the Riverside Crown Announcement Gala at the Franklin Grand Hotel, hoping to preserve the confidence of the investors. Before the event began, Richard called Grace. "If you go there and embarrass the company, your name will be erased from the Bennett family." Grace looked at the residents sleeping on temporary folding beds. You erased me from this family the moment you chose your reputation over their lives. The Franklin Grand Hotel glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Reporters, investors, city officials, and members of Philadelphia's wealthiest social circles gathered around banquet tables covered with white silk. Victor had assigned Grace and Elias to a small table near the service entrance. While introducing the guests, he deliberately raised his voice. My sister is also here with her new husband, a maintenance worker who somehow convinced her that poverty is a virtue. The familiar laughter spread through the room. Grace did not lower her head. She placed the files Denise had rescued on the table and looked directly toward the stage. Victor stood in front of an architectural rendering showing the glass towers that would replace Riverside. I am pleased to announce that Riverside Crown has received the support of the Hart Community Trust. The applause had barely begun when a woman in a gray suit stood up. I am legal counsel for the Hart Community Trust. That statement is not accurate. The trust has not approved the loan. Victor's face turned pale. If there has been a misunderstanding, we can resolve it privately. There is no misunderstanding. She turned toward the small table near the service entrance. I would like to invite the person with final authority over the trust to join us on stage. Elias stood up. The entire ballroom fell silent as the attorney introduced him as Elias Noah Hart, the man who controlled the Hart Community Trust. The people who had once mocked his old suit now avoided his eyes. Victor stepped away from the podium. This is a fraud. He approached Grace because he wanted revenge against the Bennett family. Elias accepted the microphone, but he did not respond to the accusation. Instead, he turned toward Grace. I have the authority to stop this money from being transferred, but the person who has the right to tell the truth tonight is my wife. He handed her the microphone. Grace walked onto the stage. The woman her family had always considered weak now stood before them with evidence she had gathered herself. This is not my husband's revenge. This is a confrontation based on the truth. The screen behind Grace displayed the document transferring her 15% ownership stake. The forensic report confirming that her signature had been forged, internal emails, payments sent to the inspection company, and resident complaints that had never been addressed. Denise raised the scorched bag of documents. We reported every dangerous condition. They received every complaint, but they still claimed that we had never spoken up. Victor forced a laugh. One angry resident does not prove anything. What about me? Claire stepped forward from the back of the ballroom. She confirmed that Victor had used her name to conceal transactions with a shell company. Money from the purchase of Riverside apartments had been transferred under Victor's orders so that he could profit once the residents were forced to leave. Margaret slowly rose from her seat. I saw the ownership transfer document. I knew the signature did not look like Grace's, but Richard forced me to remain silent. Grace looked at her mother. There was pain in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. I accept your apology, but you must testify publicly. Margaret nodded through her tears. Grace turned toward her father. When did you learn that Victor had forged my signature? Richard looked at the cameras pointed directly at him. After the transfer had been completed, I discovered what he had done, but if I had made it public, the company could have collapsed. So you allowed Victor to continue putting hundreds of people in danger? Richard could not answer. The data stored on the H-17 drive showed that Victor had deliberately delayed electrical repairs, shut off water service, and disabled the fire alarms to force residents from their homes. He had also used the same company that received Grace's stolen ownership stake to profit from the Riverside project. His methods were almost identical to the ones that had caused Lily's death 12 years earlier. The attorney announced that the Hart Community Trust was freezing the loan and demanding an independent audit. Investigators then escorted Victor away from the stage. Elias leaned closer to Grace. I can withdraw all of the funding. Bennett Urban Development will collapse. Grace looked at the company employees standing below the stage. Many of them had remained silent when she was humiliated, but behind each employee was a family that depended on that paycheck. I do not want to destroy everyone just to punish a few people. Remove the corrupt leadership, protect the workers, and turn Riverside Crown into a mixed-income housing program. She proposed creating an independent oversight council that would give Riverside residents the right to participate in every decision affecting their homes. Elias agreed to place the project under the authority of that council, rather than keeping control of it himself. With Grace's 15% ownership stake restored and the support of the Hart Community Trust, the board accepted the plan. Victor faced a criminal investigation. Richard lost control of the company, but he was given the opportunity to cooperate and help repair the damage he had allowed. Margaret publicly accepted responsibility for remaining silent. 1 year later, Riverside had been renovated, with new electrical wiring, emergency exits, and fire alarm systems. The residents were protected, and the Age 17 Center had been established to provide legal assistance, medical support, and housing services for low-income families. On the day the center opened, Grace placed the brass H17 key inside a glass display case as a symbol of dignity and responsibility. One of the guests who had attended the engagement party approached her. "How does it feel to discover that you married a wealthy man?" Grace looked toward Elias. He was kneeling beside the walkway with grease covering his hands as he repaired a child's bicycle. She smiled. "He was never poor. Back then, we were simply using the wrong things to measure the value of a human being." Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If you believe that dignity should never be measured by money or social status, share your thoughts in the comments, press the like button, and subscribe to the channel for more stories about love, hope, and justice.